Second on the list, like Barack Obama, Governor Palin also left the campaign trail today, but not to visit an ailing relative. No, with 11 days to the election, she spent 2.5 hours giving a sworn deposition in the Troopergate investigation into her abuse of power as Alaska governor. Heck of a way to get out the vote. We will have much more on that story, which Palin is calling Tasergate, later on in the show. The third item on the sad list of campaign embarrassments today was the news that the highest paid employee of McCain's whole presidential campaign for the whole first half of this month was not his chief foreign policy advisor, clearly not his chief economic advisor. No, it was Governor Palin's traveling makeup artist, who also works on the reality show So You Think You Can Dance. She got paid more than $22,000 for the first 2 weeks of October alone. Good for her. That said, it's all the more embarrassing after embarrassing list item number 4, the revelations about the campaign spending $150,000 on clothing for Governor Palin. John McCain's response to that embarrassing revelation when asked about it by reporters in Florida, he said, quote, "She needed clothes." Well, who among us doesn't need $150,000 worth of clothes? Personally, I need a lifetime supply of tires and Mad Libs and beer. But I wouldn't expect my presidential campaign to pay for those things, not if I ever wanted to solicit another donation again, ever. Governor Palin's response to Wardrobegate actually made this whole embarrassing thing worse than it needed to be. She told the Chicago Tribune, quote, "That whole thing is just bad. Oh, if people only knew how frugal we are. I don't think it was anywhere near, what did they say, 150 grand? It wasn't anywhere near that. Those are not ours. That's not even my property." It's kind of painful to be criticized for something when all the facts are not out there and are not reported. It was your campaign's report of the spending, Governor. Do you see a theme developing here? Hang on, there's more. Item number 5 on our list of the campaign's pimples on prom night. Well, the Associated Press has reported that Senator McCain plans to speak to his devotees election night via video remote while he stands at an outside location on the lawn at the hotel where his supporters will be meeting. Aides said McCain might drop by the election watch party at some other point. Thanks for helping out. I'd shake your hand, but I'm not really planning on going inside. Item number 6 on this list, all the McCain staffers and senior Republicans who couldn't stop themselves from blaming each other for the campaign's decline to Robert Draper of the New York Times Magazine, and now today to Politico.com. The long knives are out and they are sharp. Quote, "One well-connected Republican in the private sector was shocked to get calls and resumes in the past few days from what he said were senior McCain aides." The story also quotes another nameless Republican saying, quote, "The lack of discipline and ability to draft and stick to a coherent message is unreal." Another senior Republican strategist suggests that McCain should give up on himself and try to save some down-ticket Republicans in congressional races instead, like Bob Dole did in 1996. So that's kind of a bad list. It was a humiliating, embarrassing, step on a dozen banana peels day for the McCain campaign. But the coup de grace did not involve Sarah Palin's embarrassing habits or the staff's embarrassing backstabbing or the graceless fear-mongering of a new pathetic ad. The capper came courtesy of John McCain's brother, if you can believe it.
Alexander 911, state your emergency.
Well, it's not an emergency, but do you know why on one side at the damn drawbridge on 95, traffic was stopped for 15 minutes, and yet traffic's coming the other way across the drawbridge?
Sir, are you calling 911 to complain about traffic?
Did he really? Can an entire political campaign just crawl under a big bed and hide for a weekend? Joining us now, Anna Marie Cox, Washington editor of what used to be Radar Magazine and a Time Magazine contributor. Anna Marie, I'm very sorry about Radar. Do you want me to ask around here for you?
Yes, if you could. If anyone needs a campaign reporter, I come pretty cheap. I also am looking for a job as a personal shopper, perhaps for Sarah Palin. And if you're interested, I have been guaranteed seats on the McCain plane for the last week of the campaign. I understand there's some journalists that can't get on, so I'm hoping maybe Maureen Dowd or Joe Klein might be interested in taking them off my hands.
I can't imagine what I could do to help more than what we just did right here, but if anything else occurs to you, I hope you'll let me know. All right.
I will.
So the Politico.com article about the Republicans blaming each other cites, and I quote, "self-serving leaks an epidemic of incontinence on McCain's own team. I mean, aside from how embarrassing it is to read the word incontinence in political news, is all
and
this...
especially concerning John McCain. It's okay, Rachel. You can go ahead and... you were going to go there. I know.
I just did it in my head. I'll let you do it out loud. Is all of this stuff, all this embarrassing stuff, happening all at once just as a coincidence, or is something new happening?
Well, I think it's something you see in every campaign, really, especially losing ones. I don't know if you were paying close attention to the Hillary campaign, but towards the end it became a lot like this as well. And I think, to be fair, it's a very human, kind of reaction, and there is really no other kind of leak than a self-serving one, unless you're talking about the other kinds of leaks that we're only alluding to. But pretty much anyone who talks to a reporter is doing it out of their own self-interest. And when a campaign is going badly, yeah, you're going to talk to a reporter and tell them bad things about the other people in the campaign and try to make it look as though you're not a part of it. If things are going well in a campaign, well, you don't really talk that much. And that's what you see with the Obama campaign. They get a lot of credit for being very disciplined, and they are very disciplined, but also they don't have anything to talk about. What are they going to tell me when things are going well? You don't go around to reporters and sort of tell everyone, well, it's going great, and are you going to write that? I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
Does that mean that when people are talking to reporters, they're essentially trying to cast the blame on somebody else so that when the history of what went wrong in the campaign is written, they don't get cast as the bad guy so they can get another job someday?
Again, I think that's kind of human, that's sort of, human nature. I think if you're asking me about why radar went down, I don't think I'd tell you it was my fault. I didn't even turn in a Spence report yet. I actually think that on the McCain campaign, there are a lot of people there that are still very true believers and still really are holding out hope for their guy to win. I think it's not exactly fair to paint the entire campaign as sort of like desperate and cleaving to sort of whatever bits of reality make them look the best. I think that, we have to remember, as sort of as sad and funny as that list that you read off was, this is still a presidential election, and there are people with very serious beliefs and have some very serious issues in mind when they're looking at these decisions that we're making about the president. And there are people who still have made up their mind. I mean, I know that's hard for us to believe, but there are people who are still making up their mind. And I think there are people in the McCain campaign and on the Obama campaign who are trying to make a pretty serious case to those people.
Do you think that Senator McCain recognizes risk here, that these seemingly small, embarrassing stories and the leaks and the way the campaign is conducting itself, even when they have good moments? I mean, they had a good moment today in Denver. The Denver Post writing very positively about that rally today. 4,000 people there, a lot of enthusiasm. They are having some good moments, but it is undercut, especially symbolically, by all these little things. I mean, he could sort of step in and say, stop leaking or I'm going to fire you, and sort of take the reins, couldn't he?
Well, yeah, he could. I don't know if they have that kind of control over their campaign at this point. I think that's one of the problems. I think there's a very diffuse sort of sense of leadership, and I don't know if McCain could really get down on that level and talk to individual people that way. I'm not sure if I'd want him to, quite frankly. That's sort of what campaign managers are for, and I think they have a little too many of them on the McCain campaign, perhaps. What I do think is that things are going well for them in some areas, and they are having a hard time getting attention for those things that are going well. And I think that has to do with the fact that, basically all journalists are frustrated novelists, and a lot of these mistakes that you're pointing out are things that have this great literary quality to them. They're sort of symbolic of something larger that's wrong with the campaign, or they give a little flash of poetry to what is otherwise a kind of clumsy narrative, or clumsy campaign, as the case may be. And I think that it's really hard as a journalist to not seize upon those moments. In fact, I actually suspect that McCain himself understands that impulse, because he is, remember, he's kind of a literary guy himself. His books are nothing to be ashamed of, or in fact they're quite good. I should and he knows something. And praiseworthy than that.
He knows something about the press and what makes a good story. He was certainly good at keeping the press on his side for a very long time. That's right.
That's right. He's a master storyteller. Just hasn't told his own story that well this time around.
Anna Marie Cox, Washington editor of the late lamented Radar magazine. She's on the job market and has a seat on the plane, everybody. She's also a contributor to Time magazine, but don't hold that against her. Anna Marie, thanks for being on the show tonight.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.